You know how sometimes a book comes along that just completely changes the way millions of people see the world? Well, back in 2005, one of those books dropped. It promised to peel back the surface of everyday life and show us the hidden machinery running underneath. But it also taught us a really powerful and maybe even unintended lesson.
It all kicks off with questions just like this one. Simple, right? A little provocative. It makes you stop and think. I mean, you hire an agent to get you the absolute best price for your home. But are their goals really the same as yours? Stick with me here, because the answer tells you pretty much everything you need to know.
And that book was Freakonomics. It was written by an economist, Levitt, and a journalist, Dubner. And it wasn't just a book, it became a full-blown cultural phenomenon. It used the tools of economics to solve all these surprising, real-world puzzles, everything from cheating school teachers to the inner workings of a drug gang.
So, what was the big idea? What made it so popular? Well, it was this kind of rogue point of view. It basically challenged all of our assumptions about the world and promised that if we could just learn to think like an economist, we could finally figure out why people really do the things they do.
See, the whole thing was built around a few core ideas. First, that incentives are the engine of modern life. They drive almost everything we do. Second, that the conventional wisdom we all just accept, yeah, it's probably wrong. Third, that the biggest, most dramatic events are often caused by these tiny hidden things that happened a long time ago. And finally, and this is a big one, that experts, your doctor, your mechanic, even your real estate agent, they often use what they know to help themselves, not necessarily to help you.
Okay, so let's circle back to that real estate agent. This is the perfect way to see how this all works in practice. It's one of the most famous examples from the book, and it just perfectly shows that last point about experts using their inside knowledge for their own benefit.
So first, we have to get our heads around this idea of incentives. Really, an incentive is just anything that nudges a person to do something. It could be money, like a bonus or a fine. It could be social, like wanting to look good to your friends. Or it could be moral, like your conscience telling you to do the right thing. And according to Freakonomics, if you can figure out the incentives, you can figure out pretty much anything. So what is the real incentive for your agent? Well, let's just do the math here. Imagine your agent is pushing you to take an offer that's, say, $10,000 less than you were hoping for, just so they can close the deal fast. For you, that's a straight-up $10,000 loss. Ouch. But for the agent, their commission is only a tiny slice of that, maybe 1.5%. So for them, they only lose about $150. For them, that's nothing. It's a tiny price to pay to get the deal done and move on to the next one. All of a sudden, their goals and your goals, they don't look so aligned anymore, do they? And this is where that information advantage really comes into play. The authors found that real estate agents basically use a secret code. When you see an ad that's filled with specific, concrete words like granite countertops or maple floors, that's a signal of real value. But when you see these empty, vague adjectives like fantastic or charming, well, that's often code for a house that has some problems the agent would rather not get into.
These kinds of insights, they feel true, don't they? They're really compelling. But, and this is a big but, this is where the story gets a whole lot messier. Because that Freakonomics method of turning these complex issues into neat, simple stories, well, it pretty quickly came under some serious fire from other academics and statisticians.
This quote, from a review in the journal American Scientist, it really nails the main criticism. The reviewers basically argued that in their hunt for a surprising gotcha take, the authors often oversimplified the data, ignored really important trade-offs, and presented what were basically just speculative theories as if they were cold, hard facts. Okay, so let's dig into a really powerful example of this. This one's from their second book, Super Freakonomics. They tell this amazing story about a brilliant algorithm that could supposedly spot terrorists just by looking at their bank accounts. Sounds incredible, right? A total game changer. So the book sets up the problem like this. Let's just say there are around 500 terrorists operating in the UK. The goal of any system like this is pretty simple. Find as many of them as you can. But here is the kicker, the part they kind of glossed over. If you look at their own numbers, their great algorithm only found 5 of those 500 terrorists. 5! That's a 99% failure rate. They spent all this time celebrating the low number of false positives, innocent people getting flagged by mistake, but they completely blew past the much, much more dangerous problem of false negatives. All the actual terrorists the system missed entirely. And look, this wasn't just a one-time thing. Critics started pointing out a whole pattern of these kinds of mistakes.
For instance, they championed a theory about missing girls in Asia, which was based on a study that the original researcher later had to retract. Then there was the shocking claim that driving drunk was actually safer than walking drunk, a conclusion that turned out to be based on a classic statistical mistake. You'd see them argue in one chapter that a star athlete is made, not born, but then in another chapter they'd show how being born in the right month or having a pro athlete for a dad makes you way more likely to succeed, totally contradicting their own point. The pattern seemed to be this hunger for a simple, shocking story, even when the data itself was way more complicated. So what's the point of all this? Is Freakonomics just a bad book? Well, no, not really. In fact, you could argue its real value is the lesson it teaches us about how to read these kinds of data-driven stories, whether you find them in a book, in the news, or, on the internet. It basically gives us a toolkit for skepticism. First, you got to check the source. Is this idea based on years of peer-reviewed research, or is it just like a friend's new paper? Second, always watch out for oversimplification. Is a really complex problem being boiled down to one simple cause while ignoring all the obvious trade-offs? And third, just learn to embrace complexity. If a claim seems super shocking and it overturns everything we thought we knew, it's probably worth asking, is this just a little too simple to be true?
Look, at the end of the day, the lesson from the whole Freakonomics phenomenon isn't that we should stop being curious about the hidden side of everything. Far from it. It's really a powerful reminder that true curiosity has to go hand in hand with a healthy, critical skepticism. It teaches us to question not just the conventional wisdom, but the cool new contrarian wisdom too. Which leaves us with one last question, and this one's for you. We are surrounded by charts, stats, and really confident storytellers throwing data at us all day long. So after seeing how even the most popular and compelling claims can be built on shaky ground, how are you going to decide what's a brilliant insight and what's just a misleading story?